obvious areas where they need to actually strengthen. And obviously, Trent Alexander going leaves a gap. Although luckily for Liverpool, Conor Bradley can come straight in. And the sense has been of potentially about 5 incoming. I mean, I think it was known last summer that Slot wanted to have a look at the forward line, and maybe would have done more business there had the right deals become available. They want a left back. Obviously, everyone expects that to be Kirkes from Bournemouth. They're one of many clubs looking at Huijsen from Bournemouth. Semenyo, another Bournemouth player. I suppose we've got echoes of the Southampton thing a few years ago here, is another player that a lot of clubs are looking at, including Liverpool. So you are talking about 5 to complement maybe this title-winning base.
The striker positions, Mark, as well, because there's a lot of chatter around Darwin Núñez, Diogo Jota, and what exactly Arne Slot wants from his number 9, because he's chopped and changed a little bit, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. And I think it's probably likely that Darwin Núñez will probably leave this summer, and obviously Federico Chiesa came in last summer and has been a bit part player really. So yes, 4 or 5 may come in, but I think there's going to be a bit of evolution as well at Liverpool. You know, you look at Alexander Arnold will go. Kirkes will probably phase out Andy Robertson. If Darwin Núñez and Chiesa move on, that's 4 that that are being replaced straight away. So I don't think it's going to be adding on top of what they've got. But obviously, Liverpool are in a position of strength, and that's what they used to do back in the 80s and 90s, or certainly the 80s when they were winning things. They would make sure that they strengthen when they were at the top. So if they win the league, they've already asserted themselves as one of the best teams in Europe this season. So I think, yeah, strengthen while you're on top, and then try and add a striker to the package. I do think they have been. I won't say they've over-relied on Mo Salah's goals this year, but if Mo Salah hadn't have contributed as much as he had done, then they might have struggled if Salah had been out for any period of time. There's an African Cup of Nations next season, so they need a more reliable goal outlet than Darwin Núñez. Diogo Jota's always scored goals, but he's never really done it prolifically as a starter. So I think prioritising the forward line as well as adding Kirkes would be the way that they would go.
And at centre-back, Ibrahima Konate is going to be entering the final year of his contract. And a player that you've reported on previously, Miguel Dean Huijsen at Bournemouth, is someone who a lot of the top clubs are looking at. Is centre-back also a priority for Liverpool?
Yeah, I mean, even I suppose, as you say, the Konate situation changed the dynamic a bit. He's been a little bit in and out this season with various issues. Although he has been one of Van Dijk's best partners for some time now. I think it's natural, of course, they look to evolve. Huijsen, the last suggestions I heard, which I think I spoke about in the show a few weeks ago, where it was actually Liverpool and Chelsea who were probably leading quite a wide pack for Huijsen, with Real Madrid obviously monitoring and potentially playing on his own Spanish nationality, given he switched from the Netherlands to Spain and lived in Spain for most of his upbringing, where Madrid obviously have this massive effect. But I think Liverpool would still be fairly confident on that one. But yeah, I think that and I suppose to pick up on Mark's point as well, I think the issue as well with bringing some of these players in, it did become clear maybe, especially in the latter half of the season, that with players like Chiesa and a few other squad members, Slot maybe didn't fully trust them as much as kind of 14 regular starters. And there is maybe a slight argument that played into why they didn't kind of go on and add, say, another trophy to the league, just because the core 14 ended up being a bit stretched. And I suppose that's what new signings will actually, they kind of replace players that weren't being used as much, so maybe increase depth a bit more.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about Manchester United, because an incredible comeback on Thursday evening against Lyon in the Europa League quarter-final. They now have a semi-final to look forward to, and a couple of interesting back pages, none more so with The Sun, really, where they mock up Harry Maguire. I don't think we need to read too much into Harry Maguire's politics there with the hat. Make Amorim great is the headline on the back of The Sun, where they suggest that he's open to playing as a striker or a makeshift striker. He has played as an auxiliary striker, given United's problems in the centre-forward position. I mean, Mark, you know the club well. Is Ruben Amorim actually considering Maguire as an option there, or is it just a kind of last-minute, stick your big man up top situation?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter, that, 20 minutes to go, you need somebody to have a bit of presence up front. But I think the fact that Maguire is in that situation highlights the problems that United have got up front. Obviously, Joshua Zirkzee is out for the season with a hamstring injury. And let's be honest, he's not been very good anyway. He's only scored 3 league goals. And then you get Rasmus Højlund, who is probably done even worse. United have no punch up front. They're a toothless attacking force, and that's why they're prioritising a striker in the summer. They want Liam Delap, but obviously they can't bring him in yet. So between now and the end of the season, it's a huge end to the season as well, because the Europa League is absolutely massive for United. They have to win it to get in the Champions League, and that would, transform everything for the club in terms of their budgets for the summer. But they're having to do it with, obviously Bruno Fernandes keeps digging out goals. You're looking around the squad, you're thinking, well, will Amad Diallo get fit before the end of the season? Possibly not. Garnacho doesn't score enough goals. So the situation is that they need to rely on Harry Maguire or somebody, to cause a problem up front. And, the fact that he scored the headed goal and won the game for United when Rasmus Højlund had another difficult night, couldn't find a shot on target, that shows you where United are at. So you might see a bit more of Harry Maguire up front between now and the end of the season.
And Mark, I just want to continue with you for a moment, because you've been reporting around United's interest in Tyler Dibling as well. Is that where would you see him fitting in? Because he's played obviously as a wide player. Would he play in one of those twin tens or one wide forward position that Amorim likes?
That would be the idea, but obviously United have got a twin approach to signings at the moment, because they have to have one plan for being in the Champions League, which again they have more options in terms of finances to spend, or another plan which would involve not being in Europe next season and just having a lot less to spend and prioritising on maybe 2 or 3 signings. And if that was the case, if it was the latter, then Tyler Dibling, they'd miss out on him. If they're in the Champions League, that would open the door for more targets, more prospects to bring players in. And Dibling, as we know, has had a great season at Southampton despite their problems. He's only 19. He's one of the players that is catching a lot of attention in the Premier League and in Germany as well. He's a player that will certainly move this summer. I think Southampton's £100 million asking price is way beyond what he will actually go for. But United will be in for him if they qualify for the Champions League. It's a big if. They'd love to have him, but if they don't make Europe next season, it's just not one they can do.
And Miguel, Ruben Amorim has suggested that he might well play the kids against Wolves on Sunday. Can you blame him for that, given the importance of the Europa League now, where United's season essentially hinges on it?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, why risk it, given even if people want to make the argument about, say, the difference you get in Premier League prize money, depending on where you finish in terms of one spot to the other, that obviously pales in terms of what qualification for the Champions League would mean. I mean, and it's almost a bit sad that means more in the actual trophy of the Europa League, but that's where we are. I say that's where modern football is, and that's where United are right now. I mean, there was an image last night when it went to 4-2, it cut to, was it Wilcox and Barada? And I suppose their faces, as we're told, maybe more than the fact that the team had just gone down 4-2 or they're facing up to Europa League elimination. It felt like there was an awful lot more in that. So in that context, given what it means for the future, as Marcus touched on, especially with the 2 transfer plans and given just how badly they evidently need business, I think it's an entirely rational decision. In fact, I'm slightly surprised even last week, say, Arteta didn't play more of the kids in between the Madrid legs.
And it's not just obviously United that are through to the Europa League semi-finals. Tottenham are as well, and we can touch on actually a former Manchester United manager here as well, because Jamie Carragher in the Telegraph describing Spurs' decision in the summer as a similar one to the one that United had with extending Erik ten Hag. He said after ten Hag's team defeated Manchester City in the FA Cup final, they made a logical decision, but were criticised for that, when actually they probably should have made the decision there and then to move on from Erik ten Hag. Is that a fair comparison, do you think, Mark, the kind of ten Hag to Postecoglou situation?
Absolutely. I was in Frankfurt for the game last night, basically because I thought that Spurs might lose. It would put Postecoglou in a very difficult position, potentially out of a job. And Spurs won, and it was a very un-Spurs-like performance. They were resolute. They kept a clean sheet. They were, like Ange said all season, when the players are back, they'll be a different team, and they were. Credit to him. But Jamie Carragher's point is a valid one, that United stuck with Ten Hag last summer. After winning the FA Cup, the fans really pushed him to stay, and at the time United had a bit of a state of flux with the structure behind the scenes in terms of Jason Wilcox, Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth, short-lived as he was at United. It's a bit different at Tottenham. I don't really get the sense that there's a groundswell of support for Ange to stay if he wins the Europa League. The noise that I'm getting, I'm not sure if it's the same with Miguel, is that Ange will have to do very, very well to stay in a job this summer, whether they win it or not. I think he's burnt a few bridges, certainly with the fans. I don't think his style of football is suited to a team that will, prosper in the Premier League. But, if you win the Europa League, Tottenham haven't won a trophy for so long that it might be enough to keep in a job. And then the question is it the right decision? And I think the jury's definitely out. And I think it'd be more unlikely for Ange to stay with the trophy as it was for Ten Hag last summer.
Yeah, does that play a factor, do you think, Miguel, that the simple fact is that maybe United as a club, I know they haven't really since Sir Alex Ferguson left, but they have a history of winning trophies, and it's slightly different in Tottenham's situation where it's been so long that actually if Postecoglou does win it, then maybe he is more likely to stay?
I think that is the caveat, but I agree with Mark there. I mean, also with the Ten Hag situation, there were two major factors in it. One, of course, was the kind of the sense of vacuum as United were changing the structure, and also I think there was the issue about they hadn't fully settled on a potential replacement, given all the managers they spoke to while Ten Hag was in the job. And the other side of it was that actually, despite some misgivings, despite some criticism, Ten Hag was actually quite popular with the fans. And as Marcus said, that doesn't really feel the case with Postecoglou at Spurs now. We're a long way from the days of his first 10 games when they were all singing along to Angels at the start of the game. I was at the Chelsea game, and obviously that whole scenario, and even some of his response after it to cupping his ear, it didn't feel like it really helped. From speaking to Spurs fans, I know many said that was almost kind of the final straw. All that said, and I think where there is a parallel with United, speaking to people around Spurs, there's almost this sense that the cup competition, or the Europa League in this case, has done something different. It's almost kind of just about held the season together. The players themselves obviously want to win something, and it has led to this transformative effect. I mean, I mentioned the Chelsea game a few seconds ago. I thought they were really, really poor for most of that game. Chelsea could have really destroyed them in the first half if they wanted to. But then I was at the Frankfurt home leg last week, and I thought it was one of Spurs' more convincing performances of the past few months. And I mean, I was watching the United game last night, given everything, but from seeing the highlights, it did look a continuation of that, and really a Spurs team we haven't seen in the league. And as Mark's referenced there, given the massive gap for Spurs, not just till 2008, but given how long it's been since they won a European trophy in the early 80s, like there can be an emotional momentum behind these things. And suddenly a manager who fans maybe weren't that warm towards, if he delivers you what you've waited years for, it can change the context.
Yeah, well, Tottenham have another opportunity to put in a convincing performance on the Easter Monday night football. They take on Nottingham Forest. You can see live coverage of that from 6:30 p.m. on Monday, Sky Sports Premier League for that one. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning papers, including in the Telegraph, Leeds on a high as Daniel Farke's side close in on a Premier League return. You're watching Back Pages tonight, and a warm welcome back to the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and ESPN senior writer Mark Ogden. Now, former clubs, ex-teammates and those in the media have been paying tribute to former Rochdale midfielder Joe Thompson, who's died at the age of 36. Joe was diagnosed with cancer for a third time in April last year. He made 225 professional appearances during his career and was forced to retire from the game in 2019. Mark, you knew him well from your, obviously, time in the Northwest. You lived in the local area. Just pay tribute to Joe for us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Joe was such a lovely guy, first and foremost. Had a great family, two young daughters, and obviously massive sympathy go to his family at the moment. But I remember the day he scored a goal to keep Rochdale in League One. It was a goal that won a game. It kept them just, I think, the last day of the season. And in the US, ESPN have a show called Sports Center, and it's basically the American version of Sky Sports News. And they have a section called Play of the Day, and it's usually restricted to NFL games, NBA games. Little Rochdale do not get on the Play of the Day on ESPN, but the day after it did, because it was such a compelling story. You know, a player that had beaten cancer twice. He was playing for his hometown team. He grew up he went to school about half a mile from the ground at Rochdale. So an incredible story of, you know, fighting back from adversity. And obviously, you know, he left football at a young age and forged a career as a motivational speaker, went into the media. But obviously a year ago, the cancer came back for a third time. And unfortunately, Joe, he tried everything. You know, I met him about a year ago in a plant-based cafe. It was his suggestion, because he tried everything. He wanted a clean lifestyle. He tried everything to beat cancer, to try every possible remedy. But unfortunately, this time it didn't work out for him. But such a lovely guy and an inspirational guy. And, you know, he's left behind a lot of friends and a lot of people who will, you know, forever admire him and take inspiration from what he did.
Mark, we echo those thoughts as well, and our condolences go to Joe's family. Let's talk about the race for promotion to the Premier League here on Back Pages tonight. Leeds with a crucial victory over Oxford United to send them back to the top of the table. I wonder what this says, Miguel, about the strength of the Premier League, but also the strength of the Championship. We're seeing possibly Leicester City be relegated this weekend, and all three promoted sides are going to come back down again. And at the moment, Leeds in the driving seat alongside Burnley, possibly Sheffield United, though that might end up going up through the playoffs, along with lots of other teams who will be hoping to get in there. But what does it say about the strength of the Premier League, but also the Championship as well?
Well, it does feel like there's a gap. And this is obviously a very relevant subject because it's sort of at the centre of the ongoing story of the independent football regulator, and especially the dispute between the EFL and the Premier League about the gradient of money, about the the package that was supposed to come after COVID, and really the gap between two divisions. The EFL want a much steadier gradient of prize money distribution, so essentially to close the gap. Whereas the Premier League are arguing on the other side that they need to keep competitiveness through their division. But it does feel like we're seeing maybe about 14 to 16 kind of Premier League clubs who are now pretty established in the division, obviously beyond the wealthiest 8 and that. And then maybe almost a Premier League 2 of about, that goes about, 10 to 12 positions into the Championship, of a few clubs that almost interchange positions. And I mean, this was actually most visibly seen a few years ago when I think there was a 4-year spell where Norwich and Fulham basically exchanged places every season. Whereas now it looks like, I mean, look, it should be stressed, it's only a short sample for the moment, but it does look like it's developing, where we're getting into the situation where the 3 that come up are almost immediately at risk of going straight back down to be replaced by clubs that were recently in the Premier League. And we have a little bit of a kind of a wider yo-yo situation. And I suppose like there's bigger issues there. I mean, there was the FA released figures the other day showcasing how much money clubs spent on agents' fees over the past 2 windows. And Leeds United were something like at least 15 million more than the rest of the Championship, who are all around kind of 1 to 3 million. I think there is very much a developing issue there that is also affecting maybe the traditional unpredictability and volatility, the glorious volatility, I would say, of the Championship.
And Mark, on Burnley, Josh Brownhill got the goal that sealed the 2-1 victory for them over Watford today. We saw how they competed in the Premier League last time under Vincent Kompany. Do you think if they go up this time, it would be different next season for Burnley?
It's hard to say that because obviously they really struggled last season. But the season prior to that under Vinny Kompany, they ran away with the Championship. And, you know, they haven't run away with it this year, but obviously they've got more than 90 points, so they're doing a very good job of doing the same. So I don't think that Burnley would, you know, thrive in the Premier League next year. I think they'd find it very difficult. I think Leeds the same, and whoever comes up with those two, if those two come up. And I think it is a concern that, you know, this season the 3 clubs that like to go down are the promoted teams, and that happened last year as well. But the gap is massive, and, you know, the quality between the 2 leagues is only growing. And I think, you know, the one kind of outlier is Luton were relegated last season, and they could be relegated again this year, which is a bit of a quirk. But generally, the teams that go down are strong. They have the parachute payment, and it's very, very difficult for anyone to compete. So I do fear for next season whether the 3 teams that come up will survive. But, you know, hopefully they do, because what we don't want is a situation where each season the 3 teams that come up are going back down again.
And we'll finish on Formula One, because the Times and the Telegraph both talking about the future of Max Verstappen and potentially leaving Red Bull Racing and going to Aston Martin. Aston Martin having some sponsorship, but also part owned by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. Miguel, it's been described in the Telegraph as a deal of the century, that they're ready to offer Max Verstappen £230 million over 3 years to drive for Aston Martin. Is this a good thing for the sport if Max Verstappen moves teams?
Well, I suppose it will bring diversity. It's obviously connected to the wider questions about state interference on sport, or state influence on sport, and how the kind of disruptive effect of that sort of money, not least with the way sport is politically used, which I would say is not really good for sport. But this is obviously of a piece, I suppose, with wider PIF strategy in sport and wider Saudi strategy in sport, where it does almost become about, ironically, other than Newcastle United, who of course won the League Cup this year, but it does becoming about kind of spending as much money as possible on the kind of biggest names and kind of brash, sensational headlines, and Verstappen as the star or the dominant figure in Formula One at the moment very much fits in with that.
On the sporting side as well, Mark, obviously there's been issues around Christian Horner at Red Bull, Adrian Newey going to Aston Martin. Can you see the sporting sense of this?
Well, I think obviously Verstappen is the best driver out there right now, and he'd want to go for a competitive car. The money situation is huge, but by now Max Verstappen will have earned enough money to do what he wants when he wants. So I think an Aston Martin move would only work in his favour away from Red Bull if he felt the car was competitive. And I don't think it would be in his interest, or he would want to go to a racing car that would spend 2 or 3 years developing and trying to get to where he is with Red Bull. So I think from a sporting perspective, I still think there's a lot of work to be done, but financially, obviously, it's a very big deal on the table.
Miguel, Mark, thanks ever so much for your time here on Back Pages tonight. Now, if you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see it. It's on hour, and the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts.